Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Good evening, everyone. The message of Spirit, to love today. Love today, yes, even in the midst of everything that we're experiencing. Spirit calls us to open our hearts even wider. And so that's what we'll be looking at tonight in our satsang experience. So when we remember that who we are is people of love, not just as individuals, but also as a community, that we remember our true identity of who we are as expressions of the divine, and collectively, what we're here to do and express is oneness, our oneness with each other. And so we return to our heart. Our spiritual practice prepares us for difficult times. And in those difficult times, you may recognize a desire to retreat, to close down, to shut down your heart, to protect, put up boundaries. And so we look at that, and we notice that, and we give ourselves compassion for that nature that we carry that wants to protect or defend as we face difficulty. And how do we face that difficulty? Through spiritual practice. And so for our experience tonight, we have our spiritual talk back following my message, and there'll be some questions that we'll be discussing. And so now I'm going to open up for the first question to you to begin to share your comments. So I'll have 3 questions tonight. And the first one is, how do you keep your heart open in difficult times? So we want to hear what your practices are or what things you focus on. How do you approach keeping your heart open in and through difficult times? We're continuing a series that we've been doing on Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times. And in this chapter on the love that will not die, she shares this story of a father who turned on the television and just happened to come across coverage of the Oklahoma City bombing. And he said he could see the firemen going into the building and bringing out these bloody and limp bodies of toddlers. Now, he is the father of a 2-year-old. And he said that in the past, before he became a father, he could just watch the footage and really feel that this was something that was happening outside of him, kind of taking it in, information, it's news. Things were different when he became a father. He began to feel the pain of what it must be like for one of the parents of these toddlers to experience their child being injured or losing their child. He was no longer able to distance himself. He feels as if each of these children were his own child. And so perhaps you've been able to manage the pain and the suffering of those who've been impacted by COVID because it was happening to other people. And now that we're in Houston, we're seeing a surge of cases. Most people that I know someone, maybe it's someone in their family, who has contracted the virus. And so how do we keep our hearts open in this experience together? I think about the change that was made in me when I got my first puppy, a beagle. We got him when he was 7 weeks old. And I remember holding him. He was in a swaddling blanket, my dog Bono. And he just is so sweet, and I felt my heart just open up to him. And the longer that I had him, I began to learn more about vegetarianism, veganism, and how animals suffered when they were slaughtered for meat. And I'm not telling you need to become a vegan, but this is my experience of having an animal that I lived with and I cared for, put in my heart a desire to not consume animals that walk the earth, because I began to feel this compassion for animals, that having one that I didn't have as much experiencing animals in the world. This is now a family member. And so I had a change in my heart. You know, the racial injustice that happened, many of us have seen the coverage. If our lives hadn't been touched by it, maybe it seemed like something that happened to other people. But then we lost George Floyd, and he was from Houston. So it came to touch us even closer. In Unity, we teach oneness. We teach that we are one with God, and we are also one with each other. And these are our first two principles of unity, recognizing our oneness with God and our oneness with each other. When we talk about spiritual awakening, many of us think that spiritual awakening, it's described as a mountaintop experience, that you transcend the human experience, and it's as if you come into a level of consciousness where you're beyond pain, you're beyond the human experience, and you become somewhat ethereal. That's kind of this ideal that we think, where we leave behind worldly attachments. Well, you know the phrase, it's lonely at the top? When you go up on the mountaintop to escape the world, you leave everybody else behind. Is that really what we're being called to do? Spiritual awakening is not an isolating from everyone. It's not going into your monastery and closing everything off from the world. It's coming into our awareness of our, not that that's not wonderful, but even in that experience, we open up to our oneness with all humanity, rather than isolating into our own experience. Let even that time, maybe that's what your lockdown experience has felt like. You're in your own monastery. Even in that, we can open up to all beings. It's interesting because I did a talk, a satsang message, and there was a comment on one of my YouTube videos from someone who is watching who said, I watched this talk, and I come, and I'm paraphrasing, I come to Unity to escape my life and to escape the news, and if I want to hear about the news, I'll just turn on the news and I won't come to a Unity service for that. And it just made me think about that. Do I use my spiritual practice as escapism? Is that something that you do? That you come to a service or you come to your meditation with the intention to go into another world, another experience, to put yourself outside of everything for a moment's time? What are you escaping? One of my spiritual teachers, Robert Brummett, says you have to go down to go up. And what he means is that we think that spiritual practice is just up and up and up and into this kind of elated bliss experience. That the teaching is, especially in Buddhism, that we go down into the depths of our experience, into the very ground of our being, in order to become awakened and enlightened. Pema Chodron explains it this way. It's as if the mountain is pointed toward the center of the earth. So that mountaintop that we seek is pointed toward the center of the earth. We move deeper and deeper into the turbulence of our experience and allow it to break our hearts wide open. And that is when we come into the heart of compassion. That is the teaching. This is where we discover the love that never dies and we recognize the divine love, which is the truth of our being. So my second question for you, for your sharing, is what suffering in humanity are you called to open your heart more to? I just invite you to just close your eyes for a moment and turn to your heart and just reflect. What is going on in our world that you can bring your heart to more, that maybe you've put outside of yourself? Maybe it's happening to someone else. You recognize you can open your heart to more. Is it our homeless population that you've stopped seeing? You've been so used to them being there. Can you open your heart to them more? Is it those who are struggling with AIDS, dying from AIDS in Africa, who don't have the medical attention that they need? Is it people who are persecuted in militaristic regimes? What is your heart saying now? Maybe it's somewhere close or somewhere far away. Whatever comes to your heart, I invite you to share that in the comments so that we all can bring our heart and our love to those places and people. So the discovery of this soft spot in your heart, this is what the Buddhists call Bodhichitta. It's a Sanskrit word that means noble or awakened heart. And this heart is present in all beings. I attended a wonderful workshop that Healing the Heart of America offered. It was called After George Floyd. And we discussed in the workshop what made this experience of George Floyd different than other experiences of racial injustice. And what many shared was that our hearts were open. We had been in isolation and lockdown, and we felt his pain as we watched him suffer. We had a collective experience together of this, and this is a sign of our spiritual awakening together. We can acknowledge that as a beautiful thing of our transformation. Grateful for that workshop. There's another one coming up that I just invite you to attend, and Reverend Karen will tell you some more about that later. It's a way to take into your heart the pain of other people's experience, and perhaps your own, perhaps what other people are experiencing as part of your own pain of the world, and turning it into compassion. So it's not that we sit in our suffering and we wallow in our misery. We take that pain, we transmute it into compassion and blessing and prayer and love. And that's the way that we deepen our experience of our own spirit and the true divine connection that we have. We all have this noble heart. It's not affected by the way we've lived our lives. It's not affected by how mean and nasty and gossipy we've ever been or anything like that, or selfish. It's the way that Pema Chodron describes it is it's like a jewel that has been buried in the earth for millions of years that still retains its color and its intensity. It's never been harmed. That heart in us is pure and perfect, and it's in all people that live, and it's completely whole. It's always whole. That can never change. So my third question for you tonight is, what do you see as a benefit of protecting yourself from other people's suffering? So it's good for us to just acknowledge what is it that we gain out of it. So we can recognize that. What is it that supports you when you do that, when you protect yourself from other people's suffering? How do you experience that? We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. We believe we're being kind to ourselves when we're protecting ourselves from other people's pain, right? That we can only take in so much. Like, my life is enough, isn't it? Do I really have to experience what the pain? It can be overwhelming. And some people have experienced this lockdown with the coronavirus, and you're home, you're having snacks, you're watching Netflix, or just pretending it's not happening, not watching the news. And sure, you can go through the experience like that. And I wonder if that's your choice, if it's caused you to feel more connected to other people or even more separate and isolated and alienated. We can feel separate from the whole when we do that, when we create those kind of hard boundaries against the world. It becomes like a prison for us, Pema Chodron tells us, and it restricts our caring to the people who are just the closest to us in our lives. And when we shield ourselves from the discomfort of the world, that is when we have deep suffering. And so when we let our hearts break open, that is when we experience our true kinship with all beings. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, says there are two types of selfish people, and I kind of get the impression from this that everybody's selfish, and he's just pointing out that there are two types. And one is the unwise, who think only of themselves, resulting in confusion and in pain. And then there are the wise, selfish people who know that the best thing that they can do for themselves is to be there for others. And when they're there for others, it results in joy. And I imagine that when they're there for others, then they shift that energy from being selfish to being giving. There's a poem by Rumi where he talks about night travelers, about going into this experience of the pain and suffering of the world. He says this: life's waters flow from darkness. Search the darkness. Don't run from it. Night travelers are full of light, and you are too. Don't leave this companionship. The moon appears for night travelers. Be watchful when the moon is full. And so even as we go into the depths of our humanity, there is light. There is a guiding light. The moon is full for us night travelers who want to open up our heart to the love that never dies. So some of your night traveling may be some lighter things. Maybe it's something like a job loss, or concerns about your child going back to school, or about you going back to work, or others in your family going into work conditions that maybe you've been able to work from home. It may be some deeper, painful issues like the terrors of war, of injustice, of hatred. And so in the tenderness of the pain itself, we discover the light of the Bodhichitta, is how Pema Chodron explains it. As night travelers, we discover this light. She shares that the Bodhichitta can be found in how we care for things. It can be found in the cleaning of our glasses, in the brushing of our hair, in the tending of a plant, watering our garden. It can be found in music, in dance and art, in poetry, in moments of gratitude, in times when we let go of our resistance, of our contention, our condemnation, and we connect with our own sorrow and our own joy. So I invite you, as you open your heart to the experiences that others near and far may be having, and pain and suffering, that you recognize that you have the ability to take that into your heart and transform it into compassion and love, and to send out a prayer, a blessing, some light, and you become a conduit for the shift of the energy of this planet from fear to love. God bless you. Namaste.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.